It's the info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. We got the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info man. You can call him information info man. Kicking knowledge all over this nation. Win, lose, or draw. You can bring your hate team, but if you want to win, please don't bring your debate team. We talking Japanese shogun, Aztecs, old mixing African dogun.
I've actually wanted to have this woman on the show since my trial run in August. My dad bought this book back in the 90s, and it was something like required reading in my home. and I called my mom the other night because it was sitting on our kitchen. We had a kitchen, countertop with cookbooks and other books that were relevant, and it was sitting there and I called up and I said, "Ma, do you remember this book?" And she's like, "It must be with your dad's books in the closet. I'll go get it." And it was right there, and it's got his name in it. You see, that's my dad, and it's marked up. He even found like mistakes in it and stuff. That's how anal he was, and circle pages and stuff. But this was required reading because for my father it was so important that I and my brother understood the society in which we live. And the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. It's a series of essays. It's heavy. It's not like, you can't read. It's not like Harry Potter. You're going to want to, take it one chapter at a time, digest it. You might want to mark it up. You might want to have some questions, heavily footnoted. And this is a woman who is extremely serious. She's a psychiatrist today, still practicing psychiatry, which means she had to go fully to medical school. That's like heavy duty brain power there. And I'm just so honored, similar to having Dick Gregory on the show for me, to be able to speak to some of our elders who have actually been in the trenches, putting out knowledge in a way I don't ever want to forget that. So I always am paying homage to people who are doing the work. And so I want to welcome to the show Dr. Francis Cress Welsing.
Well, thank you, Karen. I'm very glad to be with you.
The ISIS Papers, became to me like symbolic. Every day I'm listening to ISIS, and I was getting angry because I'm like, I refuse to call them ISIS. I refuse to call them ISIS. They're not going to usurp this name. They're not going to take this name and bastardize it and turn it into something else. You named your book The ISIS Papers for what reason?
Well, ISIS is an Egyptian goddess, and I read that truth was more important than silver and gold. Mm. And I just thought that that was significant, and so that was the primary reason that I named the book that. And I think that it's not really quite an accident that the Western powers have made ISIS the enemy.
So you're taking it there.
Right.
Okay.
I think that because also you may never have seen a copy of my first paper, The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism, White Supremacy, that has a black circle on the cover with a small white circle center. And if you cut a rectangle out of the middle of that, you see the ISIS flag. So the flag that we're told represents this terrorist group that is called ISIS. So I just say that it's very significant since all of my work is about racism, white supremacy.
So you're looking at this ISIS crisis, if I can use that, as propaganda?
Well, no. In other words, the discussion of racism is not a preferred topic in our society. And if you remember, Attorney General Eric Holder raised the question, are we a nation of cowards, being unable to talk about racism? Racism, white supremacy is the most powerful dynamic on the entire planet.
And it's the one thing that we don't ever talk about.
And it's the one thing, you see, and when people don't talk about something, it's either they are afraid to do so, or to talk about it will cause serious harm. I mean, once you understand the whys and wherefores, the in-depth reason for a whole oppressive dynamic, then the people have the keys to unraveling that dynamic and potentially replacing the unjust dynamic of racism, white supremacy with a system of justice.
So
justice meaning no one is mistreated, no one is allowed to be mistreated, and those who need the most help get the most help.
And that would seem to be, to me, an ideal situation. For some reason, it's not something that we adhere to.
One would think, but that is antithetical to the survival of racism as I have defined it. Like I say, that racism, white supremacy is a dynamic system for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival on the planet.
So is it purely that? Because I was going to ask you, why does racism have to survive?
Well, racism, white supremacy is a conscious and or subconscious construct by people who classify themselves as white for their genetic survival. Whites are a tiny minority on the planet, and they're genetic recessive in terms of skin coloration. So let's say if everybody on the planet didn't pay any attention to skin color, and everybody just melded together, and in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, if everybody loved one another and that love was expressed in terms of sexual activity and reproduction, then white would disappear.
And what would happen then?
And so if the people who classify themselves as white do not want to disappear, then they have to set up certain kinds of patterns of behavior in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
That is so fascinating to me, because I'm always thinking, how did this all start? Like, when was the first person who got up and said, hey, wait a minute, this skin color thing, I got to keep this going, and let's hatch a plan to make sure that, like, I'm like, what rooms, you know, I'm going through your book, and I actually went to the German piece back in 1942, and I went online and studied that, and we know what happened with Nazi Germany with the Semites and that whole plan. It was like such a diabolical but like plan that was working to perfection until Hitler decided, hey, you know what, France is looking really good to me in England. Let me expand my territory even more. And he got, you know, and I think I often argue, had he just stayed in his lane, he would have been able to effectively do exactly what he set out to do.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, in your subtitle, it's the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. You write that subtitle came from a statement made to you by a patient in Washington, D.C., public mental health clinic back in the 1960s, the late 1960s. You said the patient was a tall, thin, middle-aged, black-skinned man who, in a somewhat confused manner, talked earnestly to me about the problems he had experienced in his life. He said, "Doctor, if we could just find the keys to the colors." And he repeated it slowly. It was a statement I have never been able to forget, and this work is a portion of my response. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, I was a psychiatrist in training and thinking about what is causing black people to be mentally ill. I'm a third-generation physician. My father was a physician, and his father was a physician in Chicago. And so, you know, solving the healthcare problems of black people was something that was a tradition in my family.
Wait, so what sorry, just back up. So, because if I'm thinking about the time at which you became a doctor, your father was a doctor.
Right, and
his father was a doctor. How is that even possible? Like, I'm thinking about, this had to be what, the early 1900s that your grandfather?
My grandfather, Dr. Henry Claycrest, died in 1909.
So he had to be a doctor in the 1800s.
Right.
Where did he get a medical degree in this country?
In Chicago.
Wow.
And my father's a graduate of the University of Illinois Medical School. My mother was a graduate of the University of Chicago. So that was the tradition. And also my grandfather, Henry Claycrest, was interested in politics and the welfare of black people. And he also, my grandmother, who lived in our home when we were growing up, would always say your grandfather was a race man, meaning the priority, being concerned about the priority of the race. My grandfather had also written, and I didn't know this until after I had started writing, and my father found some notes that his father had written. And my grandfather had written, how dare anyone think that they are superior because of the color of their skin. Now, he wrote that before 1909. I never knew him. And then I ended up writing about color.
So it's in your DNA.
Color.
It's in your DNA, the exploration of this question, because I think, for many of us who are in the oppressed class or whatever, I don't even use those kind of words to describe people, because I just feel like, at some point, we have to get to a point of truth and reckoning about who we are and make our way regardless, right? But for you, this exploration was about what? What conclusion did you want people to come to after reading your works?
Well, in other words, it's absolutely critical that black people understand the dominant power dynamic on the planet that impacts their lives 24/7 times 365 times the length of time they've been on the planet. So this is the dominant, for example, the very fact that we are talking, this is October the 13th, 2014, the fact that we're talking about racism, the fact that we're talking about something that I wrote about racism, speaks to the dominance of racism, and there's no way of escaping it. For example, all of the issues that are in Ferguson are related to racism, white supremacy, black males being killed by white males with guns.
Yeah, chapter 15, the symbolism, logic, and meaning of justifiable homicide in the 1980s. This book, by the way, was written in the 1980s. So what you're saying to me is even more poignant. As I was rereading this chapter 15 last night, I'm like, wait a minute, this is still going on, and you break down how this system of justifiable homicide as it relates to police officers and black males in particular in the society came about. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because Ferguson today, they had a march yesterday, actually this weekend, and I'm going to talk about that later on in the show. But yeah, that's a hotbed right now. That topic is, and everyone thinks it's new, but it's not.
See, it's not new. It's not new at all. In other words, the dynamic of racism, white supremacy has been black people's experience for the last 500 years. And black people have operated in a system of praying and hoping that tomorrow it will be gone. Or if certain legislation is passed, it'll be gone. Just like our ancestors who were enslaved. They thought, well, if they take off the chains, our problems will be solved. But the chains were replaced with laws, and the laws were changed, and black people thought, well, everything is fine, we got a black president, everything is fine, and now we find ourselves in really one of the most desperate situations, local, national, global, because we have right now thousands of black people being impacted by Ebola on the continent of Africa. Those people in the west coast of Africa, those are our ancestors.
So what can we do? Because
Well, you see, Danny Fuller, who is the person that helped me understand racism, white supremacy as a system, he says this: if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Mm.
Do you see? In other words, it's no different than saying, if you're on a football field and you don't understand what the game of football is about, then you're completely confused. You'll be twirling around in a circle, not knowing what to do with your behavior.
So what should we do? Because at the end of the day...
Well, do you see, I've just stated.
Knowledge is power.
People have to understand exactly and specifically what racism, white supremacy is. And I say it's a power system dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and preventing white genetic annihilation on planet Earth.
Okay, and once we understand that, okay, all right.
Planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white by white-skinned people, and all of them are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to genetic recessive white-skinned people. Do you see? So just understanding, in other words, I don't talk about white people hating black people or people of color. No, people who classify themselves as white on planet Earth are embarked on a system of behavior that permits them to not be genetically annihilated.
Which is the first law of man, right? Survival. Right? Everybody wants to survive, right?
But it's like, as long as you don't understand specifically what people are doing, you're confused.
I got you. So once we understand that this is what we're in, what do we do with this to prevent the next Michael Brown or the next Trayvon Martin or the next Eric Gardner?
See, in other words, once you understand what fire is, you don't go around asking people, if fire breaks out in your home, what do I do? Because you understand fire. You don't stand in your house looking at a fire and telling yourself it's a bunch of a rose bush growing in the corner. If it's fire because you understand fire in depth, then you know what to do. Fire is one of the first things that parents have to help children understand. So once your brain understands something, this is why black people go around asking each other, hey, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Hey, what's happening? Because we don't know what's going on. We have been deceived when somebody tells you you're in a system of democracy and everybody is equal and everybody has equal opportunity. But that's not true. We're in a system of racism, white supremacy. And what makes black people have high blood pressure, stroke, kidney disease, diabetes, dying prematurely, obesity, all of these are illnesses specifically related to the hammering of 24/7 stress. Racism, white supremacy is 24/7 stress on black people. There's a black man just in my office talking about the employment stress as people try to prevent a highly educated, well-trained black male from advancing in a job situation. Look at what is happening to President Obama.
So when you see patients in your psychiatry practice in D.C., which is where you have your office, right? And people come in, how do you treat them? I mean, do you prescribe something? Like, what are some of the ways that folks can deal with the everyday stresses that they're dealing with?
No, you ask a person who comes into a psychiatrist's office, you know, like, what is their chief complaint, or how is it that I may help you? What is the problem? So people come to the doctor with a problem. My answer is not, let me get out my prescription pad. My response is, let me listen to you. Let me hear the history of your complaint. And with a black person, it's always some aspect of racism, because racism is the highest form of terrorism and violence on the planet.
Do you have white patients?
I've had white patients. I have a few white patients at this point.
Do you treat them based on your belief system rooted in this white supremacy?
See, in other words, people have to be treated. In psychiatry, everything has to do with reality, and people, whether or not they are in touch with reality. And black people are forced into distortions of reality because they're forced into, in a significant degree, to deny racism. In other words, you will get in trouble with people who classify themselves as white if you talk about racism.
Okay, I'm going to do that today. I'm going to do that because you just said
You're going to do what?
I'm going to talk about it.
Well, this is very important.
No, I'm going to talk about it.
We got to go back to the first black attorney general appointed under the first black president. In my book, Eric Holder is the hero of the day because he dared to say, are we a nation of cowards?
And he had to leave office under what we know.
Being unable to talk about racism. Do you see? But in other words, he is fundamentally saying, being unable to talk about reality, the country is headed towards disaster.
Okay. And I'm going to put that question out to our listeners because I'm curious, and I'm so grateful for you doing all of the work that you're doing. And folks, if you're in the D.C. area and you need a psychiatrist, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing is the one you should go see. The ISIS papers is still in circulation. I just ordered another copy. I may give it away at some point on the air as well. The keys to the colors. Thank you so much for joining us and dropping that bit of knowledge on us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Welsing.
The info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you want to know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the man with the info.